So the story of the Tower of Babel is one of those stories that in the 80s, Arsenio would have said, it makes you go, hmm. And the reason why and is that it makes no sense. And it does not transfer into today's world and today's thinking. We can easily look at many towers that are much higher than the Tower of Babel could have ever been. That was done by people who spoke different languages and still worked in unity together and was not trying to show their pride of who they were. We can look at the different space stations and see that we've accomplished things that takes us higher into the heavens. What this demonstrates is the perception that people had at that time frame that the heavens was something that was for the gods, the sky itself, and that man's attempt to build anything that seemed to touch the heavens or the firmament, that we were attempting to become gods. But let's look at this story. The first aspect of this story that we have to acknowledge is that the story is a common motif, most likely borrowed from the Babylonians, whom borrowed them from the Assyrians, Akkadians, and then up to the Sumerians. Well, in the Sumerian Akkadian story, you pretty much had Marduk, and it's the Babylonian as well. Marduk is in battle, or Marduk and Enki were in battle with Enlil over who would be the Satan, the administrator in the Sumerian word Satan, over the earth. And with them fighting over whose turn it was to be the administrator over the earth, Marduk's forces were in Babylon. Also, they were in Sodom and Gomorrah. Enlil, recognizing that Marduk's command center for communication was in Babylon, decided to destroy Marduk's tower, and then that way he cannot communicate with his forces. This is the Babylonian Sumerian story. And we know, and I know as a military person, that if you cannot communicate with your forces, if the lines of communications are taken out, you cannot coordinate your supplies and you cannot coordinate your ability to formulate attacks. But of course, this story gets elevated into a esoteric, God-centered mindset by the time we get to the Babylonians in the 6th century BCE. And in their story, it is about their God destroying the temple and confusing the languages. And when the Israelites were in captivity in Babylon, they learned this story. Remember, they took the most intelligent of the northern Israelite kingdom into captivity and educated them in the ways of Babylon. So when they left, after the Persians released them and they left, and they had now learned about Zoroastrianism and Ahura Mazda and Agra, they translated this story into their own story of how after the flood, when man populated the planet again, although their story in the flood says that the children of Japheth already had their own languages, but then revert back to say that all people spoke the same language, which is a contradiction. And that man was building a tower trying to reach the heavens, and this God said, no, let me confuse their languages, because if they were able to communicate, then there is nothing that they can accomplish and they will become like us. Well, that plan failed miserably. It's really like some old grandpa sitting there trying to explain to his grandkids of why people speak different languages and where they came from. But it's a failed plan, because man went on to build towers far higher than the ziggurats in Babylon. It is interesting that they failed to realize that the pyramids in Gaza, which were already there, the Giza Pyramid Plateau that were already there, were already higher than these ziggurats that they were building in Babylon. How did they not know, if they supposedly came out of this exodus, that the pyramids were already there and already higher than Babylon? Maybe they never came out of Egypt. Maybe they never went to Egypt, even though they were a vassal state of Egypt. when they incarnated themselves as Hebrews. But it doesn't make sense for the mindset of this God to which my guy here is speaking of. You have a God that wants people to become united under Christianity after Jesus, but yet throughout the Old Testament, it was always about my chosen people, my chosen people, my chosen people, that these are my people, which makes this God small. Because the moment you categorize a deity as the deity of this one group of people, he cannot become the deity of everyone. He is merely as small or as big as it would fit into that category. So therefore your God becomes small and cannot be the God of all people. But then in the New Testament, your God switches and becomes, and the idea of this God becoming the God of all people by spreading the word to the Gentiles and going out and giving out the Great Commission and so on and so forth, all of a sudden he becomes larger than what the original story was talking about, and now has a desire for everyone to become united, that we can build skyscrapers, we can build airplanes, we can build space stations, we can venture off beyond the stars, or into the stars, I should say, because we ain't went beyond the stars. But we can venture off. We can try to get to Mars. We can go to the moon and all these other places. And I'm not getting into a flat earth and firmament discussion on this video, but we can do these things. And this God is fine with it. He's fine with us becoming united now, which shows a change in this God. And this God is supposed to be forever. He's supposed to be always the same God with the same mentality, but yet he consistently shows that he changes his mentality based on the culture of man at any given time frame or moment. And each one of these become the different doctrines that society has portrayed this God in every century. And in centuries coming forward, there will be different depictions of this God and his mentality as far as people are concerned. And all those people will still have different viewpoints, which is why there are 40,000 variations of Christianity. There are multiple variations of Judaism. There are multiple variations of Islam. All the Abrahamics have multiple variations, just like every other religion. But if this God wanted man to be united, man was united according to his story. And then this God decided he was going to disassemble man, cause man to be separated by languages, and then desire for them to come back together. It is a foolish story. It is an ignorant story. It is one of those stories that made me say this book cannot be from a deity that is qualified to be worshipped. Because no deity that is qualified to be worshipped can have issues of jealousy and envy, can fear that man will become great and not want to worship him if man can accomplish things that does not require this God's efforting to do so or telling man to do so. They simply took an old Sumerian story that had a Babylonian twist and made it into their own Hebrew story that, with today's scientific knowledge, makes absolutely zero sense and therefore cannot be true. But y'all have a great day. And remember always, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibration.